Welcome to this tutorial and guide for Hammer Slammers the Crucible. This is intended to be a quick start aid to help you get playing in the game. So this is a demonstration of mechanics, not a battle report. There is no points balancing in this. This is purely for demonstration. The first thing to think about is choosing the type of battle you want to play. There are three types: standard battle, objective battle and raid. Standard battle, both sides deploy from opposite table edges using the close range distance bracket. In this case, we're using the Hammer Slammers the Crucible digital edition, which uses the 15mm range brackets. So the table edges would be 8 centimeters. It's the first to lose 50% of tactical units in each individual detachment that make up one side of the force. That is considered the breaking point. There are advanced rules. Do breaking tests on your quality roll for each detachment once you get down to 50% of your tactical units, and you repeat this quality check as you lose additional tactical units each turn. The other two battles, objective battle and raid, you place an objective down and then the attacker deploys likewise within close range of the furthest table edge from where the defender places down the objective. The defender can then deploy around the objective. This is kept loose as a description as you are setting up a defensive position knowing that you're going to be attacked. The difference between objective and raid is that the winner is the force that has one of its tactical units closest to the objective by the end of the game. If you're playing a small game, you could play to the last tactical unit and ignore breaking. If you're playing a game that involves multiple detachments, I would suggest bringing into play potentially breaking point into this. For raid, it's exactly the same deployment. The difference is you have to destroy the objective. Depending on what forces you take, again, you may wish to balance off the raid with how tough the objective is to destroy, or to roll in the standard breaking point for forces as per a standard battle. Here I'm simulating an objective battle. We will pretend that these forces are deployed within 8 centimeters of the table edge for the purpose of the demonstration, and realistically we have the opposing forces here, the Friesland Defence Force, which are deployed around the objective, which is highlighted here by this red counter, but the actual objective itself is the building. I've just placed the counter here so you can remember which of the two buildings the objective is in the demonstration. Both sides have 2 detachments each. They are made up of 8 tactical units because they are both elite forces. The first here is made up of 2 artillery pieces, a command car which is the leader of this detachment, 2 skimmers, a jeep with mortar and 2 infantry on the building rooftops, but they are inside the building for the purpose of the game. The second detachment has 4 up-armoured blower tanks or hover tanks and 4 combat cars. There is a command up-armoured blower tank that has the Hammer Slammers insignia on the back, that has the leader for this second detachment. Likewise, there are 2 mirroring detachments back here. They're made up of 8 tactical units each. The 2 leaders with command vehicles are denoted by the Alday Legion's insignia on the side, the 2 crossed tusks, and that denotes the leaders. When you make a marking on tactical units that easily identify the leader of each detachment to both sides playing, then you are to make modifications to balance this within the game. I personally recommend marking out your leaders, your command vehicles, because it's just easier to remember as you're tracking through the game, and the rules that balance this out for being able to see where the commanders are, I think do the job. So I always tend to lean towards going for marking out commanders. The first thing you do to start the game once you've deployed is for each individual detachment, so there's 2 per side, you're rolling a order roll off. So this is to determine who gets to select who moves first or second with one of their detachments of choice. The reason why this is played this way is because there's more than one detachment in play. If there was just one detachment per side, you would do the single roll off, and then of course there would be no alternative activation after this for additional detachments. It would just be you're either going first or second, and the winner of the roll-off gets to choose that. So 1 dice per detachment, and then you're adding the leadership value of the detachment commander of each. So in this example, on the left hand side here, this command vehicle has a lieutenant in it, and here the second detachment, this commander has a captain. Likewise, there's a lieutenant in the command car and a captain in the command tank. Both sides, as I've said, have demarcated commanders, so you +2 to their leadership value. In this case, a lieutenant has a leadership value of 6, so that would bring you up to 8. A captain would be leadership value of 8, and that would bring you up to leadership value 10. Likewise for the other side. So if we imagine that these rolls are the actual rolls that are made, we would have a roll of 8 plus 3, so we have 11 here, 10 plus 1, 11 also. We'd have the 5 roll here with the leadership value of 10, so that would make 15, that would be the overall winner. So immediately we can discard and not have to worry about these rolls. Clearly this is the winner. If there are draws, those detachments that draw have a roll off until someone gets a highest value, and then they can choose whether to go first or second. So in this case, the Friesland Defence Force, which is post 45 Slammers, has won the order roll. So they can choose to go first or second. So they are going to choose to go first. They now choose one of their detachments to go first. In this case, they are choosing the detachment with the captain in it that has the 4 tanks and the 4 combat cars. You're rolling 2 dice instead of 1, and you're adding your leadership value to the roll. So in this case, I'm going to face the numbers that they roll. Let's say that they roll 7. So it would be 7 plus 10 for the captain because of the leadership value, and that would make 17 leadership points to spend with this detachment. You can spend leadership points on movement and shooting, special orders, or you can reserve leadership points for a pool of other actions. I'll demonstrate movement first. Shooting and movement per tactical unit cost 1 leadership point. So I would take a tally down of the 17 points that you've generated, and you want to be marking them off as you're spending them so you know how many you've got left and that you don't underspend or overspend. Any unused points, as I said, you can store across multiple turns of the game. So the first thing you do is you check what kind of movement type your tactical unit has. In this case, I'm going to look at the 4 tanks in front. So these blower tanks are considered heavy hover, and they are medium in speed, and so they have 10 centimeter movement. There is then, on the quick sheet guide, a movement and ranges chart. You will look up your heavy hover and you'll see what band of terrain it's currently in, which will affect its movement. If the type of terrain is not marked in any of the terrain types, and it would be considered clear going terrain, you would move the standard movement. In this case, we're on concrete or tarmac, as you can see here, and so the movement band goes up by 1. So they were on medium movement, which is 10 centimeters. But because they're on this tarmac or concrete surface, they move up a band to fast movement, which would make them go from 10 centimeters movement to 15 centimeters. So as you can see here, they can move all the way up to here for 1 leadership point. So I will have spent 4 leadership points from the 17. Likewise, I can move these 4 combat cars. The combat cars are considered fast light hover. Fast light hover consider snow, calm waters, and the tarmac or concrete as easygoing terrain. So we match the easygoing terrain parameters for them. So we move up from fast 1 movement band, which would bring us from 15 centimeters in fast to very fast. Very fast means that they go from 15 centimeters to 25 centimeters. So we have 25 centimeter movement, which means we could move all the way out to here. Note, there is no limitation on the distance you can be from your commander within a detachment, as they are communicating typically through military encrypted communication. So they have all the range you like on the tabletop. So we've just spent 8 leadership points of our 17, which means that we have 9 left. So we have 9 leadership points left to spend. We could use those 9 points to fire with every single tactical unit in the detachment once, and we'd be left with 1 leadership point to either save or use for something else. In this case, we're going to save 1 leadership point, and we're going to use the 8 to fire everything. I will demonstrate firing from the tank. We'll pick the command tank. All tanks and all other tactical units are elite, so their standard quality roll for shooting is 3+, which means they need a 3+ to hit without any modifications applied. So that's the standard to hit roll. I'm going to choose to fire at this anti-aircraft unit over here. This is firing at what is a medium tank. So first we check the range. pausing at the point in which the command tank was going to fire at the medium anti-aircraft tank, I will recap where in the turn sequence we have moved up to, giving context to the simple movement and then targeting for shooting. First of all, in the turn sequence we did the ordering roll, and we found that the detachment that I ended up moving won the overall rolling on the leadership values. Then we diced for the amount of leadership points that were available. Third, we were to allocate AA status for weapons that have this capability. The weapons have this capability, but I chose not to activate the AA, so it is assumed they are in the normal mode. And then fourth, using the leadership points, I decided to move the units. Additionally, during the phase after moving, you can allocate various extra commands, such as additional movement, spending leadership points on artillery, or conferring concentration fire, rapid fire, and other various special actions if required. I decided to not spend any actions on special tasks or to use any leadership points for artillery. We then moved to phase 5, which was the shooting. The moment I declared that I was shooting, I had activated phase 5 in the turn sequence. There were no mortars or anti-tank guided weapons. Everything that I was about to shoot was direct fire. The next part of firing, which is where we left off, was checking to see the line of sight and range. I'm now going to continue with the shooting from the detachment. So I had chosen to shoot command tank here. So first you check the range. Like movement, range itself has various bands, and we will see how they fall into play. So first of all, we check the range, and from the tank in centimeters, we find we are at 18 centimeters away. How does 18 centimeters interact with the weapon that's being used? Well, first you have to look at the range bands. The range bands go from point blank at 3 centimeters to then close up to 8 centimeters. 30 centimeters is medium. 120 centimeters to 250 centimeters is long range. Beyond long range, there is in fact a further distancing, which is considered infinite. Some weapons, depending on their profile, may limit as to what the maximum or minimum range bracket is within the various bands that they can actually fire upon a unit that they're targeting. In the case of power guns, there are no limits, so theoretically you can shoot at a target from infinite centimeters away. As I've quoted, the shot was 18 centimeters. 18 centimeters puts us in at short range. From point blank, you add 1 up to close range at 8 centimeters to the firing tactical unit's quality roll, so the to hit roll. This only is a factor if the unit is beneath the level of elite. Since both sides are elite, this range modifier does not come into play, and so is at the optimum to hit roll that you can possibly have for a unit. So this would be ignored. For instance, if I was firing as a veteran tank, instead of having to roll 4 or more to hit a target in the open, I would only have to roll 3+ on 1d6. The unit is already elite, and so I just simply need to roll 3+ on a dice. Checking line of sight is based on true line of sight, so you may want to get yourself a laser pointer or just get your eyes down to table level and see if there's any obfuscation of the tactical units that you are targeting. In this case, the unit is an open ground and so can be seen clearly without any obfuscation. So we have checked range and we've also checked line of sight, and go ahead. We will now roll the quality roll for the command tank to fire upon the anti-aircraft vehicle. For the sake of this roll, I am going to say that a 3+ was rolled for the quality roll. Therefore, a hit has occurred on the vehicle. The next thing to work out, because this is a vehicle tactical unit, is what part of the armor was hit. So we are looking to figure out what vehicle arc we are facing. From the vehicle, you split your arcs into 4 main arcs for direct fire. These are the front, left side, right side and rear. To explain and to make it simple, I will show you an example of firing arcs. Using this command tank, you are now seeing the firing arcs. As you can see, you have a front 90 degrees, so 45 degrees from the left and to the right of the forward of the vehicle, and then the sides and the rear rear matching the front. So from this vehicle firing to this anti-aircraft vehicle here, you're finding that if you are shooting, you are hitting the front arc of the vehicle. The next roll to make is for seeing if you can get past the defense value of the vehicle that you're shooting at. To do this, the gun stats must be looked at for the main cannon firing from the tank. In this case, it's firing a 20 centimeter high power gun. The 20 centimeter high power gun has one shot and has a firepower of 3 against infantry and 9 against vehicles. You will roll a single dice and you will add the firepower value, the FP value, to that dice roll. So because we are firing at a vehicle, we are using the firepower value of 9 plus the value on the dice roll. So if we imagine that we roll a 4, we would take that 9 and 4 and we would make the score of 13. We would then look up the front defense value of the medium tank. In this case, the front defense value of the medium tank is 10. To put the other defense values of the vehicle arcs into perspective, the sides of the vehicle, as shown with the blue markers before, would be at defense value 9 and the rear arc at 8. There is a fifth vehicle arc, and that is known as top armor. Top armor is only used if either the vehicle is being fired at from a weapon system that specifically targets top armor, or another tactical unit shooting down at the vehicle from a 45-degree angle or more. The top armor value of this tank equates to the rear armor at value 8. Some vehicles can have weaker top armor even than the typically weakest main arc being the rear. For instance, the top armor to a Baumann MICV has a top armor of 6, whereas the rear armor is 7. So, back to shooting the front armor from the command tank with its high power gun, hitting the front armor of the medium anti-tank vehicle. A score of 13 was made, so this meets or exceeds the defensive value of the front armor, which was 10. It has exceeded the front armor value by 3 more than was required. At this point, you are now rolling on a vehicle damage table to resolve what the power gun is going to do to this vehicle. So now that we've established the attack roll exceeded the defense target by 3, we consult the damage roll table. You roll 1d6. The overkill rule takes into effect, which means that the d6 roll is adjusted by the addition of a further 3 to the total. For example, if a 2 was rolled, you would plus 3, making 5, which would equate to the target being destroyed, but the hull would stay. I'll just quickly go through the damaging roll table. Getting a total of 1 from a dice roll plus any added overkill bonuses from going above the defense value of the target you're hitting at would create a stall, so the unit you have shot at would not be able to move or fire the next turn. On the roll of a 2 or the value of a 2, transmission busted would mean no moving ever, so a form of immobilization. And then 3, you would destroy a weapon permanently, but your opponent's side would be able to choose which weapon was destroyed. On a 4, a weapon would also be destroyed, but this time you get to choose which weapon is destroyed. 5, as I've already said, is the vehicle is destroyed, stays in place, so the vehicle becomes a type of barrier that can either be pushed out of the way or can end up obfuscating and getting in the way of other targets. And then finally 6, the vehicle itself blows up. This vehicle blowing up creates an explosion to which, within an 8 centimeter radius, all infantry would immediately be given a suppression marker. If infantry were suppressed, it would -1 from their quality roll and they would not be able to move until the suppression marker was removed. With the surplus of 3 for overkill, that would make 6, and therefore this vehicle would be destroyed. Now let's imagine, as I described earlier, there were any forms of infantry, in this case infantry on foot and a skimmer. You would check 8 centimeters from the vehicle in a 360-degree arc, and you would see that both tactical units units were within 8, and therefore, because of this, they would become suppressed with a single suppression, like so. You really do not want to have infantry close to vehicles if you think they're going to get hit. And so, in this example, the anti-aircraft with the laser weaponry on the medium tank hull is destroyed. I have placed this mark here to represent a destroyed tactical unit that's blown up for now. We'll see what further actions will occur on the turn sequence. We left off with direct shooting and we went through the line of sight, the quality roll to hit, and then we went for the attack roll, which was successful. Then we went through to the defense roll. The artillery, if called in from last turn, would arrive and you'd do the damage. Finally, you would dice to remove suppression on infantry. This would be 1 suppression token per tactical unit. So for instance, if the infantry on the roofs of the building that we used as our example of taking a suppression token from being damaged from the explosion of the vehicle, you would roll a single d6 against their quality value and you'd be looking to get 3+. That would then allow them to remove their suppression token, and so that means from this moment forwards, if they had no suppression tokens, they would be back to full capability as if they were never shot at. And then finally, phase 9 of the turn sequence, you remove destroyed tactical units. In our example here, the anti-aircraft vehicle was destroyed, so it is removed from play. To be clear, if a result of 5 on the chart for the grand total for the damage roll was a 5 for destruction, then you could either have a wreckage of your vehicle staying, or you could keep a damage marker with it to denote that it's staying there with the hull as a wreck. And now, because the initiative winner, or the winner of the orders roll as it's officially called, has taken its action on a selected detachment, because remember, if you get the winning roll across all your detachment, you can then choose which detachment of your entire force may go first. If you're playing a multiplayer game, by default you could choose anyone on your side for tactical purposes to go first with their detachment. It's all about simply generating the highest value out of all of the leaders and individual detachment levels. So because of this, now the opposition may choose a detachment because there was no simultaneous fire that had been happening since it was the first turn. Stepping back from orders all the way down to close assault, that is the actions you carry out in a phase for the detachment activated. Now it's the opportunity for their opponent to activate a detachment, and those last phases, which were the results of the ATGWs, mortars and artillery fire, the calling in effects of artillery if it had happened previously, the dicing to remove suppressions on infantry, and finally the removal of destroyed TUs, happens at the very end of the entire turn when all detachments have activated. In other words, these are simultaneous to end the turn. So activation is thrown over to one of the detachments now, in case there are simultaneous actions to occur at the end. So for now, we will keep this marker against the vehicle that blew up so that it can be removed when we have finished all of the activations in this whole entire game turn. I will skip the leadership point generation as I've already demonstrated this. To recap, it was 2d6 plus the leadership value of this detachment. Note, because we have a destroyed tactical unit, we now activate the mounting chaos rule applying to this detachment's leadership points generation, so it will be the leadership value of the current leader, which is still present and not destroyed as a tactical unit, plus 2d6 plus a further 2 for having the elite skill of communication technician, but minus 1 for the destruction of the TU for the mounting chaos. So to be clear, the lieutenant provides a leadership of 8. This is added to 2d6 roll result. In this case, let's say it's 4, which makes 12. Then, for the fact that all leaders have communication technicians within their vehicle, you add a further 2, which would result in the value of 14. But because of having a destroyed tactical unit within the detachment, according to the mounting chaos rule, this score of 14 falls back to 13 for its order of play. As can be seen here, this is considered not tarmac or concrete, and all of the vehicles are ranging from fast hover through to medium light hover. None of those types of vehicles can use this as easygoing terrain. At the same time, it is not difficult or impassable terrain. It's just a field that's patchy with grass and soil, and therefore any movement would be their standard movement value. So it's the standard band of movement. In the case of these vehicles, we are moving 15 centimeters across the board. You can move in any direction, there is no limitation on turning arcs. This 15 centimeter move can go in any direction like so. And can end in any facing. If I were to shoot at this infantry over here, we can show a number of rules involved. But first, I would demonstrate what happens if you move into terrain that is considered a type of difficult terrain. If we imagine for one moment that these are large boulders or rubble that this vehicle is trying to cross, you would move up to the point where the rubble is making contact with your tactical unit. You would then need to pass a quality check to be able to cross the rest of your movement over the terrain. So you would need a 3+, like so. If you failed the roll, and so you had, for instance, a roll of a 2, you could then re-roll. You would use the rule known as the 1-2-4 rule, which means to re-roll the quality check to get over this terrain, it would now cost an additional 2 leadership points, and you would yet again try and get 3 or more on the dice roll to cross. 1-2-4 rule is also used for additional movement, so back to our detachment that has been doing its movement, I could then spend a further 2 points to move any of my tactical units a further 15 centimeters. Note, because I started in the terrain that is not easy going, as I move into easy going, the movement band does not increase. Only on a third movement, which would now cost an additional 4 leadership points, I could move a bracket up and go to a very fast movement at 25 centimeters. So as you can see, with the correct leadership points management, you can easily outflank and outmaneuver your opponent. So now for shooting a non-vehicle unit and discussing how terrain and cover works. Let's say here that this heavy laser tank wants to fire at the infantry with inside the building on one of the levels. You do automatically see the infantry hiding in the building because they are not in an active hidden state, which is a special rule that only applies if they are added to coordinates on a map and declared that they are hidden at the beginning of the game, else they can be detected by the vehicle. In the case of this vehicle, it has 2 weapons that it can fire. All vehicles can fire every weapon system once by default for a leadership point. These shots can be carried out on multiple targets per single weapon. Infantry can fire a maximum of 2 types of weapons. So for example, this infantry could have power guns and a buzz bomb. They could fire the power guns at a unit and then fire the buzz bomb at another. But back to the laser tank that's going to shoot the infantry hiding inside the building on one of the floors. Firstly, you would measure the range, and we are within short range there. You would then see if the unit is obscured. Now, because they are hiding inside the building, they are obscured because they are not perfectly revealed in the open. They are partially obscured. This would -1 off the to hit roll, so instead of requiring a 3+ to hit them, you would need a 4+ on a dice roll. Let's imagine that the laser tank makes its hits. It can fire multiple weapons, as I've already stated, so the laser itself has 2 shots instead of 1, so therefore it could make 2 hitting shots on a 4+. Then additionally, it also has a tri-barrel, and this has 3 shots, and it would require a 4+ to hit. And then finally, if within 8 centimeters, which it is not, you could use the panel ADS system, which is typically designed to stop buzz bomb anti-tank weapons that infantry can fire at a vehicle, or as a makeshift attempt can be used against anti-tank guided weapons on the roll of a 6+, as it is not specifically designed to stop them, but in this late stage of technical development, the ADS systems are so refined that there is this 1 in 6 chance of actually being able to stop the anti-tank guided weapons that come in from the high arcs of fire. So this leaves 5 potential shots, and we will imagine that all 5 have hit. You've rolled a very high score. As I've said before, the firepower is broken into anti-infantry or anti-vehicle. In the case of heavy lasers, the 2 shots have a firepower value of 4, whereas the tri-barrel against infantry has a firepower of 3. So, very much like shooting the vehicle before, you will roll a d6 for the damage value against the defense of the infantry, and add the firepower value or the infantry firepower value to that d6 roll to see what the total is. So the first thing to do is figure out what type of infantry it is. What is the defensive value? This infantry has a defensive value by default of 6. Equally, the building that it's in is made of reinforced concrete, and so it'd be considered as heavy terrain that they're in. So it would add 2 to the defense value, bringing its defense value up from 6 to 8. There is an option to, instead of attacking the infantry at defense value 8, for directly attacking with the laser weaponry and the power guns the building itself. The building has a damage table just like a vehicle and can affect infantry that are hiding inside it. There are optional rules for multi-floored buildings where you can treat each floor as an individual damage table, and it's not until you destroy every single floor that the building is considered destroyed. For the purpose of my explanation, and typically to speed up games, I would advise not using this advanced rule and simply going for using the standard damage table for all your buildings, as they typically have their defense value adjusted depending on what the building is made of and whether it's fortified. So as I said, this building is a heavy building that is made of reinforced concrete, and so therefore the building itself has a defensive value of 7. Buildings range from light buildings made of wooden construction through to medium buildings, which would be a brick construction. Heavy building would be, as I've said, reinforced concrete. Then there'd be a light bunker or steel bridge at defensive value 8. These are just examples, so equivalents would still count, and you'd need to declare what your building types are at the beginning of the game. And finally, there's the idea of a heavy bunker or starport main building, perhaps a fortress, and that would be at the maximum defense value of 9. If a building is struck with a hit and you decide to fire at it instead of the infantry, considering in this case the heavy building's defense value is 7, whereas the infantry, its defense value is 8, so it's 1 less. Now you'd have to weigh in the firepower on the vehicle firepower against the building, whereas against the infantry you use the infantry firepower value of your weapons. And so with this in mind, you would find that for the laser with its 2 shots, it is 4 against infantry but 5 against vehicles, and for the power gun it is 3 against infantry and vehicles for its firepower. So all in all, out of all of these shots, you have a building that has 1 less defense value, and your lasers are more effective at directly firing at the building with its higher firepower value against vehicles of 5. So it is very much a option where you can be looked to damage the building. Buildings also can have the overkill effect placed against them. The more you exceed the defense value of the building, the more that the damage table is increased with its total result. Just like firing at vehicles, you would roll on a d6, and I will give you an example. Let's say that the lasers are fired and they are a firepower 5. Let's say that they both rolled a 3. This would be 8, which would be 1 more than defense of the building, and so it would be the effect from the building table plus 1. Now 1 would apply a suppress to the infantry. 2 would also apply the suppress of an infantry. If the building itself had a wall, it would be breached. 3, same again, but the building would be burning. This is just a visual effect, and the rule is not covered for what the building does in the game. 5, the infantry would have free suppression placed on it, and this would be all infantry inside the building. If you are not working on multi-floors, free suppression, depending on the rules, could either destroy trained troops or below, or if you're playing the standard infantry suppression rules, merely one away from destroying all the infantry in a building. With this 12 to 13 floor building, you could certainly have multiple tactical units on different floors and end up destroying them all. And finally, on 6, the building is completely destroyed, and all infantry inside are instantly killed. So it's well worth contemplating whether you want to directly strike the building or directly strike at the infantry. Back to if I was firing at the infantry, this would be a 8. Now the upside to firing at the infantry, even though the firepower was 4 instead of 5 against infantry, is that if I can get a score of 4 or more to get to that defense value of 8, and in the case of here I'd need 5 or more because the power gun had a infantry firepower of 3, so I would need 5s for the power gun to get through on a direct shot of the infantry in the heavy building with its own defense value. So it was defense value 6, minus 1 to hit, so you need a 4 up instead of 3 up, and additionally plus 2 to the defense, bringing the defense up to 8. So in this case, if any of these target rolls succeeds and I get 8 or more, it's instant death for the infantry. There is no damage table for infantry. If you get equal to their defense value or higher, they are destroyed. If you get lower, they are given 1 suppression marker. I'm going to now explain assault. So if we imagine that the infantry from this building, in its own activation, decided to close assault this tank, you could have up to 1 infantry tactical unit attack each facing of a vehicle, like so. This is the maximum amount of simultaneous assault on a vehicle that can carry out, whereas tactical unit infantry versus infantry doesn't have such a limit, and it will work as a total combat. As infantry close in on a vehicle, if that vehicle has any form of ADS panels, box mines, or any other defensive system, they will damage the infantry before the close assault even begins, and they can die before they actually get into assault. An example of the ADS panels would mean that on a 3 up, all the infantry would take firepower 4 attack. Now, because they're out in the open, they only have the defense of 6 up, so on a 2 up, they would be destroyed. So you very much need heavy infantry when facing off such an advanced vehicle, otherwise I could roll for each individual assault, and in the case of this roll, all 4 would be destroyed before they could do their damage in assault. Every unit in the game has what's called an assault value if it's an infantry. It will then roll its assault value plus a d6 to see if it can get through, in this case, the vehicle's armour. The rear is the weakest point of the armour, and additionally, if the assault is still carried on at the end of the turn and the infantry are still there, one of the infantry may then climb on top of the vehicle and assault the top armour in this next turn. If infantry were fighting infantry, each unit to this side to that side would roll a d6 each, add their assault values, and whoever got the highest grand total would win the combat, and all opposing units would be destroyed if one unit exceeds the overall assault value to the other. So infantry on infantry close assault is massively devastating, and you can end up, if you have mass ranked infantry, with ginormous slaughters, removing whole entire detachments of infantry in a single close assault. I'm going to finish on the off-board artillery rules. As some of the advanced systems like anti-tank guided weapons work on the same premise as what I've already shown, it's just that when they actually hit, it's simultaneous and on a different phase, which you can easily track with the turn sequence that's on the player sheet for the game. There are multiple ways of calculating off-board artillery. The first will be, well, how many leadership points does it take to call in a single artillery strike? By default, it's 20. So we'll pretend that the Friesland Defence Force has 20. So the flow of artillery strikes is as follows. After you've completed your movement, you can allocate remaining leadership points that you're not going to spend on shooting or other tasks to the artillery pool. Then in phase 7, you can mark down to have its landing point. This does not have to be on a TU, as there is an area of effect going on. Then in the subsequent phase 7C, the artillery will finally be called in on the next complete turn. From the point that you'd marked, everything within 20 centimeters will be affected by the artillery that's an enemy TU. By default, this is 6 individual to hit rolls and damage rolls to top armor, 1 per tactical unit of your choice. But there are further rules to make artillery even more devastating. Firstly, you may choose an artillery master special skill for a leader. If that master of artillery is bringing down one of the artillery strikes that usually costs 20 points, the points cost will be halved to 10 leadership points. Additionally, there will be 2 separate strikes, and so this would raise the amount of possible tactical units that can be hit. Bear in mind, it's 1 attack per tactical unit. It will raise it from 6 to 12, and so it would require a lot more defensive fire to shoot down the artillery, and certainly at that point it should generate enough hits to wipe out a significant amount of the opposing force. Further to this, the artillery fire can have an area of effect of itself, and so in the case of large artillery, each single strike, which should be between 6 and 12 depending on whether you have Master of Artillery calling down the strike, so we'll stick with the default 6 individual TUs that you can target within 20 centimeters of your target point that are enemy, each individual strike point on a tactical unit, and so each individual area of effect artillery strike, so from here would have a 20 centimeter radius, but each of the 6 tactical units that you chose would then have a radius around it of close range for artillery. This would be the 8 centimeters. For instance, if one of my 6 was targeted to this vehicle here, an enemy within 8 could then also be hit. This does not include friendly fire, as the attack patterns are very accurate. I could target one of my 6 here, and the 8 would hit this other vehicle. Equally, I could target these 2, and the 8 would then carry on, the 8 centimeter radius would carry on, so I could add a further tactical unit to be struck by an attack. For heavy artillery, such as the hogs that are used like so, when they're off table, they will have a firepower value against vehicles of 6 on top armor, and considering even these heavier tanks only have a top armor value of between 8 and 7, then you can realize how devastating this kind of strike would be, and why typically you need to limit it to the default 20 leadership points and only start with bringing in area of effect as a special rule. Otherwise, if you move up to Master of Artillery, it could be an overwhelming and game-breaking support call-in, but is particularly useful if you're trying to convey very large battles across huge playing spaces on the tabletop. There are still many more rules and optional extras that can be brought into this game, but I'm going to stop there, as I think this gives you more than enough exposure to the main rule system. Most rules are intuitive. For instance, debusting out of vehicles. You could move your vehicle just as before with 1 leadership point, and maybe even a second time for 2, and a third time for 4, using the 1-2-4 rule. But then you could spend an additional leadership point to allow infantry to debust. That infantry could then spend a leadership point within the detachment to move and could fire as normal. Equally, a friendly infantry unit, if that has the capability to transport, could pick up a completely different tactical unit simply because it is infantry and therefore it can go into a vehicle that can hold them. And so for a point, it could go into the vehicle and the vehicle could then move away if it has the leadership points to do so and the amount of tasks to be able to complete another movement. So I hope this has helped show that with the quick reference guides in front of you and the weapons chart, you can start by playing small games and add in as many of the intuitive advanced rules as you like to bring in the flavour of the game. Probably the main part that I would leave you to try out is the defensive system and the defensive fire, getting used to applying defensive fire around the movement phase on some of your weapon systems, because that is probably the first thing you could forget, especially if you know the other side are going to be using a lot of artillery and anti-tank guided weapons. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoy going and playing the Crucible.